was startled. Like maybe it didn't expect her to be there, or maybe she wasn't supposed to be awake and she surprised it or something. And so, she takes off running. And at this point, like the entire house is filled with this bright light, and she feels like she's struck by some sort of magnetic energy. So, anybody who's ever had like a small electric shock, will understand this feeling. And it was all over her body basically. So she's pretty much kept immobile by this electricity or vibrational feeling, this magnetic pull. And so she feels herself being pulled back towards the couch she was just sleeping on. So at this point, she's pulled backwards and she's floating in the air, and, she's a few feet above her couch, and she's dropped unceremoniously onto the couch she was just sleeping on. And at that point, as soon as she's dropped onto this couch, she feels like she can start moving again. She's not paralyzed anymore. The light disappears, and and there's nobody in her house.
That's interesting. That's the first time I've actually heard where, one of these grays, made any noise, because everybody I've talked to, they always say it's always been telepathic. They didn't see a mouth open or anything like this to make a screech like that. I find that really, interesting. The standpoint, I could see it possibly happening because, being a woman, or even me, I'll be honest with you, I'd probably scream too.
Yeah, well, sure. Yeah, I mean, it's startling to say the least. But yeah, no, I mean, that's why this one was so weird. Because yeah, I'd never heard that either. I much like yourself, I had never heard anybody talk about any communication one way or another with any kind of alien gray that was anything other than this telepathic sort of communication. So yeah, I mean, again, she was one of these witnesses where, I mean, I don't know, Gary. I talked to her myself. We actually have a mutual friend who had recommended her to tell her story to me. So she's not making it up, and at that point, once again, like with so many of these reports, like where does that leave me? She's not making it up. I did really delve into. As far as during the interview, I really wanted to rule out that this could have been some kind of dream, because that's usually where I would expect, any skeptical person's mind to go. Okay, well, she was asleep, she had a weird dream, and that's all it was. Well, there's a lot of reasons for me to think that isn't the case, because it is something that, like I said, I had focused on specifically during this interview. And so initially, she had said that when she fell onto the couch, it felt like she was, it felt like she woke up at that point. But when she says that it felt like she woke up, really what she was trying to describe was the feeling of being able to move again. And she couldn't think of any better way to describe it than, that feeling of going from, being paralyzed to being able to move like we do when we wake up, basically. I mean, if people don't realize it, we're all paralyzed while we sleep. That's our brain naturally secretes this chemical that keeps us paralyzed while we sleep, so we don't act out our dreams and hurt ourselves. It's a very useful process. So that was the best way she could sort of describe that transition from paralysis to to being able to move again, because I questioned her heart on this, during this experience, are you sure you woke up when you were on the couch? And she was adamant that she had woken up, and at no point, during this experience, did she have any missing time? There was nothing that she couldn't account for. None of it, there was no dreamlike quality to this. And when she was dropped onto the couch, there was no, as soon as she could move again, there was no associated grogginess. It didn't feel like she was coming, out of a sleep state into wakefulness. It was dropped onto the couch, can suddenly move again, looking around, wondering what the hell just happened. So, I definitely understand people who have never had any kind of weird experience who would be willing to write that off as a dream, but I believe this woman because I spoke to her myself, and I understand that in her experience, according to what she's describing, I think it's entirely possible that it wasn't, any kind of dream. So,
well, it's too detailed, to be a dream, because dreams have voided areas in them. And
sure.
It's just like some of the guests I had, like Timothy Cullen, that saw a UFO, him and his wife in his car. And for some reason, when he saw it, he must have either been put under or transported on the UFO or whatever, because he got implanted. He was one of that Dr. Roger Lear actually removed the implant from. So I really, if you could be in your car and be abducted, and certainly there's a lot of people, being abducted out of their houses and that. It seems to be a lot of women too. And it makes me wonder why. And maybe it's because they're, seeking DNA or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, who knows? Well, in this case, I don't even think that she was actually properly abducted. I think that because of the interaction she had with this being, I think that she wasn't supposed to be awake, and I think that really the abduction itself was, if that was what was supposed to happen, I think it was aborted once everything just, kind of went foobar, because she was awake when she wasn't supposed to, and she startled the crap out of that gray. So, it's one of those stories that is just so weird that, it's almost too weird to be made up, and I hate saying stuff like that, but it's one of those things where if you talk to this young woman, she is, again, she's a normal, credible person that I actually have a friend in common with who is also somebody I would consider very credible. And there's no reason for her to be making this up. It doesn't. When you speak to her, she speaks about it almost like she's embarrassed because, like we were talking about before, it's very difficult for people to talk about stuff like this because they're so used to being dismissed. And she's certainly not looking to get anything out of it. She had this incredible experience. She related it very matter-of-factly. I don't see any reason not to believe her. So,
well, it sounds sounds so believable compared to a lot of stories I've heard on the show, with encounters of grays and stuff like that. But it's strange. I do think things like this is going on. I think it's a lot more than people even can comprehend. But I think probably what saved her little fanny was her screaming, and it probably did enough where the thing figured to move on to somebody else.
Yeah, that's sort of that's just how I'm approaching it myself, honestly, because it really does feel like she interrupted something. So it's interesting. Actually, I had a similar experience myself, not so much in that it was an encounter with a gray or anything like that, but sort of the experience of feeling like I had interrupted something that maybe I wasn't supposed to be awake for necessarily. So I'm not sure if I'd ever told you this one before. So
no, you haven't.
This would have been back.
If you want to,
Okay.
Go. Please do. We got a lot
yeah.
we got a large listenership now, way larger than I think you realize. And
well.
and I think a lot of people want to hear about it.
Great. So this is one of quite a few strange experiences I had in my life, and so sort of what I was talking about before. This is one of those things that really drove me to get into doing what I do, frankly. And so this would have been in my early 20s. I was living with my parents and sort of figuring out what I wanted to do. I was getting ready to go to college. I had been working, saving up money to do that. And so I remember waking up one night and, I was sure I was awake. I was so sure that I was awake that, I was as sure that I was awake then as I am right now, honestly. And so, it's the middle of the night. This was in the suburbs of Madison. So this was in the Sun Prairie, Wisconsin. So it's got the ambient light of the suburbs, So even though the blinds were shut, there was some light coming in enough where, when you wake up and it's dark, you can still look around and your eyes adjust and you can make out some of the things in your room, so I could see like the silhouette of my dresser and like my weight bench and all of that stuff was there. And I look over, and now there are two things that I noticed almost immediately. The first one was that my vantage point of the things in my room was skewed, and that seemed to be because I was floating about 3 feet above my bed. And I look over to my left, and I see this shadowy humanoid figure standing there. I mean, it didn't look like it had a big head or anything like that. It literally looked like the shadow of a man, or a man made out of shadow, even. And I look over at this thing, and I'm not paralyzed in any way. I turn my head over and look right at it, and I feel like I can move if I want to. I decided at that point that it probably wasn't a great idea for me to try, because I didn't feel like I was even supposed to be awake at this point. It really felt like I was interrupting something. And so I look over, and this thing, whatever it is, obviously notices that I'm awake at this point, and I will remember this until the day I die. I can still feel it, actually. It reaches its left hand out, and it puts its hand on my chest, like almost comfortingly. And I'm lowered back down to my bed, and then it's just gone. It just disappears.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it was something else. And, there really wasn't anything for me to do at that point, and I had experienced a good amount of strange things growing up, to the point where, I knew like there was no point in going and waking up my parents or anything. Like, they weren't going to do anything. There wasn't anything for them to do.
I know what my parents would have said, Tobias. They would have said, hey, go back to bed. You're having a dream. That's what my parents would have said.
Well, right. Yeah. I mean, that's exactly it, frankly. And so I just lied there for a while, and I kind of thought about what happened, and I didn't feel like I was in any danger. or anything like that. And so, after a little while, I just went back to sleep.